Last Friday, the President of the Republic of Kenya chaired a meeting of the National Security Council. And of course, many people, me included, speculated that top on the agenda would be analyzing the consequences of relaxing or easing the current restrictions in the country. Indeed, quite a number of things had already happened that suggested that that would be the decision that the government would take to relax the restrictions in the country over the virus. Number one, post-coronavirus politics had already been launched in a very big way with the changes in the Senate. The CS Education put together a committee to look into the best ways of resuming classes. Our kids going back to school and colleges. There were hints here and there that the aviation industry was preparing for the resumption of flights. But it would seem that we all read the situation incorrectly. Because the President, in an address to the nation yesterday, extended the curfew, the ongoing curfew in the country, for another 21 days. And rather than easing the restrictions, more were added. The country decided to close its borders with Somalia and Tanzania. So we analysts need to go back to the drawing board and try and analyze what really is happening here and where we went wrong in our predictions. And we now have to assume that what the government wants to do is to resume schooling while keeping the restrictions in place. If this assumption is indeed true, it presents us with a very alarming possibility, and that is the possibility that the government is very much disconnected with the reality on the ground as far as the ordinary Kenyan is concerned. You know, one thing that has come out very clearly over the last few weeks is that a vast majority of parents are not willing to release their children to go back to school. But at the same time, they're very concerned, they're very worried, and they're very anxious about their children not going to school. They would like school to resume as soon as possible. And to somebody who is disconnected with the reality on the ground in Kenya, that would seem a contradiction. And maybe even some people in government have said, these parents are confused. They don't seem to know what they want. Maybe they're just scared of their young ones contracting the virus in school. But they shouldn't be. Because the government plans to put in place measures like social distancing, wearing of masks, etc., to ensure that that does not happen when schools resume. But as the government speaks like that, they have misread the situation. They don't understand. And the same goes to quite a number of private schools, which in the recent past have run into serious problems with parents. Problems to do with money. And indeed, my friends, that is where the mystery can be neatly solved. Money. You know, there are some Kenyans, when the school term begins, they simply swagger into the bank and write a check. They just ask, how much? And then they put together every single cent that is required to pay the fees and all the other costs for a full term for their children. But those Kenyans are very few. And unfortunately, those are the Kenyans in decision-making positions. And these decision makers imagine that it is possible to resume schooling with the restrictions still in place. That one, it can't happen. And I'll tell you why. You see, whenever it comes to time for the kids to go back to school, a vast majority of Kenyan parents break into a cold sweat. Many go into serious prayer to ask help from Almighty God on how they're going to raise the fees and the other related costs. Many others enter into negotiations with the schools where the children are going on how the fees is going to be paid in installments. Many others take a SACCO loan, while others are denied because they have overborrowed from their SACCOs. And this situation I'm describing unfolds when everything is normal. And so I want you to imagine what the situation is with this virus. People have lost livelihoods. People are worried about how they're going to put food on the table. And then you start talking about school. This time, instead of breaking into a cold sweat, they will sweat blood. Bottom line, for you to resume schooling in Kenya, you'd first of all need to resume normal economic activity. You would first need to remove all restrictions. And that is not all. You would have to pray that things go back to being as normal as possible, that many Kenyans manage to recover their livelihoods. Before all that happens, talking about kids going back to school is a pipe dream. Maybe you want small classes, of 5, 6, 10, a very small percentage of children back to school. If you want that, then it's doable. But is that what we really want? You see, if you're not disconnected from what is really happening to the ordinary Kenyan on the ground, you will also know that it's not all about school fees. There are other costs. In many instances, you will need to organize lunch, transport to school and back, uniform, shoes, etc., etc. And we are very blessed in Kenya. Our children are rapidly growing all the time. And so the shoes you bought a few months back now don't fit. Or maybe they're worn out. They need to be replaced. Bottom line, you need to understand the vast majority of parents when they say they are not yet ready to release their young ones to go back to school. You really need to read between the lines and understand precisely what they're saying. And yet they are very worried that the children are losing time in school. And the other worries that have nothing to do with finances. For instance, your son or daughter can be delayed in getting back home, transport problems, and therefore they are not able to beat the curfew. What happens then? Because we have all seen how the police have reacted in the past in dealing with those who break the curfew, or those who are late for one reason or the other in making it home on time before the curfew starts. And our police have a long history of dealing with students exactly the same way they deal with adults. I know that for a fact, not from being told, because when I was still in school, I encountered cops several times. And I was lucky. Some of my schoolmates ended up with serious injuries. That is Kenya. To cut a very long story short, it is obvious that the government is not fully aware of what Kenyans are going through. And if they are, they have decided to ignore it. And there are many examples to prove this. We are told to stay at home. We are told there's a curfew in place. And then that same government telling us that goes and destroys houses, demolishes structures housing Kenyans that leave over 5,000 families without a roof on their head in Kariobangi. And the consequences of that. In a nutshell, people are struggling to put food on the table. And then you go demolish their houses, destroying some of their precious property. And currently, there are heavy rains all over Kenya. So the rain comes and destroys their stock of food, hunger or rice or whatever it is. So yes, we have heard what the government has said, but what do the actions tell us very loudly? And that is not all. This demolishing of houses happens at night. In the latest case in Ruai, where over 1,000 families have been left homeless, the operation started at 10 p.m. at night. That is when the kids are already asleep. It is clear whoever gave that order either doesn't know this, that kids are already asleep at that time, and they're bound to get hurt, rained on, maybe even attacked and harassed by thugs. Either they didn't know all that, or they simply ignored it. But then the same government is very determined that children go back to school. What? And then there are the recent developments along the Kenyan-Tanzanian border. It started with testing drivers from Tanzania trying to cross the border into Kenya. And if they tested positive, that was the end of the journey. And it didn't matter if that particular truck was carrying perishable food products. That was not important. And then it has escalated to the current situation where the border is closed. Okay, we're being told cargo will be allowed through. But the Tanzanian government has retaliated. The Tanzanians have said they will also now not accept any trucks to cross the border from Kenya into their country. What that means is that if there's anything being transported into Tanzania, even if it was sourced beyond Kenya, when that truck reaches the border with Tanzania, that is the end of the journey. They will need to offload whatever they're carrying at the border. And then the recipient of that cargo in Tanzania will need to make arrangements to collect his package, his consignment from the border. Now, all this drama, whatever the reasons, has other consequences, which I'm not sure if those in authority have seen. Number one, you have disrupted livelihoods. Those in Kenya waiting for that cargo to arrive so that they could sell it and put food on the table for their families have now lost livelihoods. Many of those trucks coming into the country from Tanzania are usually carrying foodstuffs, especially maize. And so you don't need to be very smart to predict a looming maize shortage, and indeed a looming food shortage. In my view, Tanzanians will not be as affected as Kenyans will be, mainly because they have enough food within their borders. Kenya does not. Kenya, first of all, has been hit by a lot of misfortunes, which directly affect our food production. There were the swarms of locusts, and what was left was washed away. A lot of it has been washed away by floods. Tanzania has had no problem of locusts so far. They have had no floods. They have been busy working. They have been in full production right across the board. Now, I know the view of many on this channel about the virus. And I don't want to argue about that. I don't even want to discuss that. I think I've said enough. I am now focusing on the consequences of our actions and decisions. To give those Kenyans living out of the country a heads up. I'm sure you have relatives and friends and your people in Kenya. So you have this heads up. You know you now need to start preparing how you're going to assist your people in Kenya. And this is much more productive than arguing over things which should be very obvious. Let's stay focused on the consequences, on the effects of what is being done. And I also realize that some of these topics may be boring to many of you. And this is reflected in our media. What is being discussed in the press? Team Keleweke, Team Tangatanga, the changes in the Senate, changes coming in parliament, politics. Everybody is analyzing politics, and hardly anybody is analyzing the consequences that are unfolding right before our eyes. Now, before I go, I want to give you a very big tip. Those people interested in investing, those people interested in business, those people interested in having a heads up going forward. Now, financial experts have told us now is a good time to buy gold or silver. Because many currencies are going to dramatically lose their value. If I were you, I would stay away from gold, stay away from silver, and instead I would invest in commodities, and especially food commodities. Now, we're going to discuss this in much more detail on this channel in coming days. But for now, I need to ask you a very simple question to prove my point. If we had a serious food crisis worldwide, and you went somewhere with your gold to exchange your gold for some food for your family to eat, and then you met somebody else there exchanging their food products for the same food you want or for the same food you're interested in, what deal do you think the seller, this person you're targeting, would prefer? I put it to you, no matter how much gold you want to offer them, it will be in their best interest. And indeed, in most instances, what they'll do is exchange those vegetables for the extra maize they have. Exchange their food, which is scarce, for more food. Now, don't get me wrong. Investing in gold is smart when currencies are losing value. You just keep the gold until things go back to normal. And then your fortune will be intact. That, of course, makes sense. But then there's one small problem. Before you reach that future, that distant future, you will have to go through the immediate future and the now. And in any case, if you've invested in food, you'll easily be able to exchange that food for gold towards the tail end of the crisis we're just now entering. Folks, think about it, and think about it very deeply. Investing in food, growing your own food, is the only way to go. And regulars will know that we have talked about vertical sack farming on this channel, where you can grow a lot of food in a very small space. I forgive you for laughing very loudly earlier. But now, my strong advice is that you take another look at that idea you laughed at. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.